From the station that's working for you, you're watching Fox 4 News at 9 a.m.
We ask very simple questions. What makes you happy? What do you eat? What do you like to cook? And everywhere in the world we go and ask these very simple questions, we tend to get some really astonishing answers.
Well, if you're just waking up, we are following this sad breaking news that Anthony Bourdain is dead. He was just 61 years old. Boy, a tough morning this morning, a tough week here in Kansas City. I'm Mark Alford.
And I'm Kim Burns. Thanks for joining us. We're going to bring in Rob Collins because you have more about the legacy that Anthony Bourdain leaves behind.
Yeah, this broke about 3 hours ago. And
Apparent
we've been,
suicide.
Following it and trying to get more information. Anthony Bourdain was found in his hotel room this morning by a friend. They were in France recording for an upcoming season of his acclaimed series, Parts Unknown. CNN has confirmed Bourdain, in fact, killed himself. CNN released this statement. You can read along with me on the television. Quote, his love of adventure made him a unique storyteller. His talents never cease to amaze us, and we will miss him very much. Our thoughts and prayers are with his daughter and family at this incredibly difficult time. People are sharing their thoughts on social media regarding Anthony Bourdain. Daniel Rappaport writes in, quote, heard so many people say if they could have one job, it would be Anthony Bourdain's. Goes to show that absolutely no one is immune to issues of mental health. Tremendously sad. Rip, end quote. Gordon Ramsay tweeted out this statement. He says, stunned and saddened by the loss of Anthony Bourdain, he brought the world into our homes and inspired so many people to explore cultures and cities through their food. Remember that help is only a phone call away, and he gives a number, 1-800-273-TALK. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention published a survey yesterday showing suicide rates increased by 25% across the United States over nearly 2 decades. The topic made headlines earlier this week as we reported Kansas City native fashion icon Kate Spade took her own life. We now know the 55-year-old was being treated for depression and anxiety. That's according to her family. CDC and Prevention says in the last 20 years, suicides have increased in all age groups. The highest spike is for women, 45 to 64. About 16% of people who take their lives do not have a history of mental health issues. Metro Family says they did not see any warning signs of suicide before one of their loved ones took their life.
It's the life of the party. She was always smiling and happy, and you know, she had so many friends. I mean, everybody loves Heather. We all miss her.
The Hillworth family is sharing their story in hopes it will encourage others to go out and get help. Another effort to raise awareness will air next Saturday on HBO. The focus is the life and career of the late Robin Williams. The film is titled Robin Williams, Come Inside My Mind, and this morning we're getting our first look.
Stand-up is survival. For me, that's jazz. That's what I have to do.
Robin was like nothing I'd ever seen.
He stood out in a way that nobody else did.
He was really comfortable on stage. Off stage, I just felt he was holding himself together.
The documentary features interviews from Billy Crystal, David Letterman, Steve Martin, and Williams' son, Zach. It will cover both his life on stage, off stage, and the inner demons that eventually led to his suicide.
He, more than anyone, reminded me of Don, though, in his circumstance. Hey, thank you so much, Rob. Very good background look at what's going on.
Yeah, and we want to bring in the Director of Clinical Treatment at Research Psychiatric Center now, Cynthia Benbow. Thank you so much for being with us. Why do you think we're seeing this increase in the number of suicides, really across all lines, but especially in women?
In women. Yeah, good question. I think oftentimes when people think of depression, they think of chronic depression or major depression, but really there's a thing called situational depression. Events or changes in life that are sudden and unexpected may lead people to feel that they have no hope or no other options.
But Cynthia, we give these numbers out all the time. We've been doing this for years now, and there's more help out there online, and people are talking about it, and yet the rate's gone up. What did you say? Like 25% over the last
Since
20 years.
1999,
Have we removed the stigma from suicide and almost made it acceptable as an option for people?
Yeah, good question. I think even in 2018, the stigma still exists. I think for somebody as popular as these two actors, there's still a negative connotation to suicide, to depression, that often people don't want to be associated with.
There should be a stigma against suicide, right? Just not against reaching out for help and
Right.
mental health.
Absolutely.
We don't want to get those two mixed up. We should stigmatize suicide. It is not good.
Well, I think from the perspective of people even contemplating, even saying out loud, admitting, yeah, I've had suicidal thoughts, or I've had thoughts of wanting to hurt myself. What they really may be saying is, I've had a life change event in my life that's been traumatic or overwhelming for me, and I need help.
But here's the problem. We give out these numbers a lot. We keep saying the same old thing, and it keeps happening to people we know and love. And people who are not in a right frame of mind, they don't have the cognitive rationale to call that number, do they?
Not necessarily, but that's where friends and family come into place. I think it's important to recognize when people have a change in behavior. Somebody who you're used to talking with daily, and all of a sudden you're not talking with them anymore, or you have planned events and they call you and they abruptly change the events. So oftentimes people will say, I didn't see those signs, but they're really subtle in nature.
What advice do you have if someone who's watching right now thinks they may have a loved one who's considering suicide or something? How do you reach out to those people? What's the proper way to do that?
Yeah, I think you call them. You remind them how much you care about them. Remind them of how important their life is. And then I think you connect them to people, professionals, who can then further that conversation and get them the help they need. At Research Psychiatric Center, we offer a wide range of services and opportunities, but the main thing we offer is 24-hour assessment.
I hear a lot from people who call in these numbers and they don't have the insurance to cover mental health. We don't have that set up in America.
Yeah, true. But I think it's important for people to remember that psychiatric care is emergency care.
But should you have a loved one committed? If they threaten suicide, do you call police? Do you have them committed so they don't take their own lives?
Well, there is a program in Kansas City called CIT. We work very closely with Kansas City Police Department and Fire Department. When they go out on calls, folks will call 911, and they are trained to recognize those signs and symptoms that may suggest a person's at risk of taking their life. So they will then connect the person to a psychiatric hospital or that hotline number that that we often publicize.
What do you think it's going to take to reduce these numbers that we've been reporting? I mean, the numbers are astounding over the last 20 years.
Yeah, I think just what we're doing now, we're talking about it. I think it's conversation. The more we talk about it, the more people are aware that it doesn't have a certain face. That's the thing. People have perceptions about only folks with mental illness are at risk for suicide. The truth is, anybody at any time could potentially be at risk. It often takes one traumatic event or life change that could be traumatic enough for them to want to consider ending their life.
And taking the stigma away from reaching out for
Right,
help.
Absolutely, absolutely, very important.
Cynthia, thank you so much.
Yes.
Very informative.
You've been
Thank
so
you.
helpful.
We do want to remind you about our You Matter campaign that we started after dawn. If you or someone you know has suicidal ideation, thinking about suicide, you need to intervene. They may not be thinking in their right mind to call this number as we talked about. You need to do something. There's a couple of numbers we want you to call, 1-800-273-TALK and 1-800-SUICIDE. At least it's a start to get some help.